The air inside the Yamaha garage at Mugello was thick with more than just the smell of high-octane fuel and scorched rubber. It was heavy with a silence that felt almost suffocating. On the monitors, a set of numbers flickered in bright, digital lime green numbers that, according to the laws of physics and the history of the M1, shouldn't have existed. Just moments earlier, a blue and silver prototype had screamed down the main straight, the scream of its V4 engine echoing off the empty grandstands like a declaration of war. When the transponder crossed the line, the digital clock stopped at a time that caused a collective intake of breath among the engineers. It wasn't just a fast lap. It was a demolition of every internal benchmark Yamaha had spent a decade building. The man in the saddle wasn't a MotoGP veteran. He wasn't the reigning champion. He was an outsider, a rider many said would be too aggressive for the delicate world of prototype racing. But in that single moment, Toprak Razgatlioglu didn't just break a track record. He broke the psychological hierarchy of the entire paddock. And for the two men watching from the shadows, Marquez and Fabio Quartararo, the world they thought they controlled had just shifted on its axis. For years, Yamaha lived by a singular philosophy, the inline-4 engine. It was a philosophy of silk and precision, built for corner speed and rider harmony. But in the modern era of MotoGP, that philosophy had become a cage. They were being bullied on the straights by Ducati and outbraked by KTM. The decision to scrap their entire technical identity and build a V4 engine for the 2026 season was more than a technical change. It was a desperate multi-million-dollar gamble to save the brand from irrelevance. During the early phases of the V4 project, the whispers from the test tracks were worrying. The bike was powerful, yes, but it was unruly. It lacked the stability that had defined Yamaha for 40 years. Engineers struggled to find a balance between the raw horsepower of the V4 and the chassis ability to handle the load. They needed a rider who didn't just ride the bike, but one who could wrestle it into submission. When Yamaha announced the signing of Toprak Razgatlioglu, the paddock reacted with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Critics argued that his spectacular rear-wheel-in-the-air braking style was a relic of the superbike world, something that would shred MotoGP's sensitive Michelin tires in 3 laps. They said he was a marketing move, a way to bring Turkish eyes to the screen. But as the sun rose over the Tuscan hills for the closed Mugello test, Yamaha wasn't looking for marketing. They were looking for a miracle. Yet as the first session began, even the most optimistic engineers began to look nervous. The V4 was a different beast entirely, and the Mugello circuit with its terrifyingly fast changes of direction is the ultimate judge of a rider's soul. The San Donato corner at Mugello is a place where heroes are made and careers are ended. It requires a rider to drop from over 350 kilometers per hour to a crawl while leaning into a heavy uphill apex. It is the ultimate test of front-end confidence. As Toprak began his afternoon time attack simulation, the telemetry started to show something the engineers had never seen before. Usually when a rider brakes as late as Toprak, the sensors record a massive wobble, an instability where the chassis begins to protest the extreme load. But the V4, paired with Toprak's unique mechanical sympathy, remained eerily flat. He was performing his trademark Stoprak style, braking so deep and so hard that the rear of the bike danced inches off the asphalt. But he was doing it with a level of control that defied the carbon fiber limits of the M1. According to internal sources, his entry speed into San Donato was not just higher than his teammates. It was higher than anything the Yamaha data loggers had recorded in the last 5 years. The engineers stared at the screens, waiting for the inevitable crash, the moment where the front tire would give up. But it never came. Instead, the bike tracked perfectly through the apex, the V4 engine picking up the drive with a violent efficiency that sent him catapulting toward the Luco turn. The superbike style wasn't a hindrance, it was the missing key. But while the engineers were celebrating, a much darker tension was brewing at the back of the garage. Fabio Quartararo is a man who wears his heart on his sleeve. For years, he has been the sole light at the end of Yamaha's dark tunnel, dragging an underpowered bike to podiums through sheer willpower. He is the master of the smooth style, the benchmark for how a Yamaha should be ridden. But as the Frenchman stood in the garage, his eyes fixed on Toprak's telemetry, the color reportedly drained from his face. He watched the lines on the screen, the traces representing throttle position, brake pressure, and lean angle. Toprak was finding speed in the Arrabbiata 1 and 2 sections, the fastest, most dangerous corners on the calendar, that Fabio hadn't even thought was possible on the new V4. For a long time, Fabio said nothing. He didn't talk to his crew chief, he didn't look at the cameras. He simply stood there, staring at the digital ghost of a teammate who had just redefined the limits of his machine. In that silence, the dynamic of the Yamaha team changed forever. The benchmark had been moved, and for the first time in his career, Fabio Quartararo wasn't the one who had moved it. The tension was palpable. A rider's greatest rival is always the person on the other side of the garage, and Fabio had just realized that the new guy wasn't just there to learn, he was there to take over. Yet, as the session continued, the mystery deepened. Because Toprak wasn't just chasing Fabio, he was chasing a ghost that had haunted the paddock for 2 decades. In the world of MotoGP, Marquez is the ultimate litmus test. Even when he isn't on the track, his historical data is the gold standard for what a human being can do on 2 wheels. For the 2026 V4 project, Yamaha engineers had used Marquez's sector times as their absolute ceiling. If they could get a rider within 2/10 of Marc's Mugello pace, the project would be considered a success. During the final hour of the test, Toprak was sent out on a full-power map with a fresh set of soft tires. The team wasn't just looking for consistency anymore, they wanted to see the ceiling. What happened next sent shockwaves through the paddock. Toprak didn't just touch the Marquez benchmark, he shattered it. In the pure speed simulations, his sector times through the technical middle part of the track were consistently faster than the data points set by the 8-time world champion. It wasn't just about bravery, it was technical mastery. Toprak was using the V4's acceleration to mask the bike's remaining weaknesses, finding a way to rotate the bike using the rear tire in a way that mimicked the legendary adaptability of Marquez himself. Paddock insiders began to whisper a terrifying thought. What happens when you give the most aggressive breaker in the world the most powerful engine Yamaha has ever built? The answer was on the stopwatch, and it was a warning shot aimed directly at the heart of the Ducati dominance. The biggest criticism leveled against Toprak before the test was that his style was a tire killer. Critics claimed that while he might be fast for 1 lap, he would be a sitting duck by lap 15 of a race. To address this, Yamaha ordered a grueling 20-lap race simulation in the heat of the afternoon. This is where the true twist of the Mugello test occurred. Usually, as the Michelin tires degrade, a rider has to become smoother, backing off the brakes to save the front end. But Toprak did the opposite. As the grip levels dropped, he adjusted his body position and used the V4's engine braking maps to compensate. His lap times didn't just stay consistent, they stayed elite. The expected collapse of his pace never happened. One Yamaha technical source described the performance as complete, noting that Toprak understood how to push the mechanical limits of the bike without overstepping the thermal limits of the tires. He was doing things with a V4 engine that engineers had previously thought were impossible. He was making the bike stay stable in sections where the old inline-4 would have been screaming for mercy. By the time he pulled back into the pits, the mood in the garage had shifted from cautious optimism to a sense of historical significance. They weren't just looking at a successful test, they were looking at the beginning of a new era. As the sun set over the Mugello circuit and the Yamaha trucks began to pack away the secret prototypes, the atmosphere was one of controlled electricity. Yamaha management is notoriously conservative, yet the smiles on the faces of the top brass were impossible to hide. The decision to hire Toprak, a move many called a marketing ploy, had just been vindicated in the most violent way possible. But while Yamaha celebrates, the rest of the paddock is waking up to a new reality. The 2026 season was supposed to be a battle between the established giants, Marquez trying to cement his legacy and the Ducati Armada trying to defend their fort. Now a third force has entered the equation, a rider with nothing to lose, a style that defies logic, and a bike that finally has the teeth to bite back. Toprak Razgatlioglu is no longer the superbike guy trying to fit in. He is the man who silenced a world champion and beat the data of a legend in a single afternoon. The Mugello test was conducted in private, away from the prying eyes of the media, but the telemetry doesn't lie. The ripples of what happened in those closed sessions are already spreading through the paddock, reaching the ears of the rival teams. Rumors are circulating that some rival manufacturers are already re-evaluating their own aero packages to counter the Toprak effect. But as the first race of 2026 approaches, one question remains that leaves even the most veteran mechanics stunned. If Toprak can do this in a test, what will he do when the lights go out and there are 20 other riders standing in his way? The